Welcome back to the classroom. My name is Mr. Wong, and today we'll be covering a question from Module 2, Inquiry Question 3. This is all about collisions. We're going to explain the exam of the 2019 Independent Physics paper for Year 11, Question 22. So, we have two different types of hammers, a hammer with a steel head, as you can see, and then we have a hammer with a rubber head. We want to explain how the different construction of the hammer enhances their use. Okay, so let's have a look. Some hammers have made of steel, some have rubber heads. Steel hammers are used to hammer nails, while rubber hammers are for settling paved stones. So let's try and work out why one would be used over the other. Let's firstly analyze the difference in the construct. So with the steel head and the rubber head, what kind of different kind of collisions could we cause? Well, we can probably suggest that with a steel head, it's more elastic collision, whilst the rubber head is probably a little bit more inelastic. What else could we say? Let's talk about maybe the momentum changes and the impulses. Okay, so impulse or change in momentum. Impulse is the change or the amount of force an object experiences over a period of time. Okay, so what we can say is if it's an elastic collision, we can expect that there's a greater force applied over a shorter period of time. If it was using a rubber head, we could experience, because it's inelastic collision, we can probably assume that the amount of force is lower and spread over a much greater period of time, because some of that energy upon that collision, some of that will be transferred over and slowing the hammer down upon collision. This is less likely to happen with our steel hammerhead. Okay, so let's try and break this question up in terms of the structural difference, and then we'll also look at application difference. So structural difference in collision. So for our steel hammerhead, we'll have a case of a more elastic collision, and that would mean that upon collision, it's a shorter period of time in collision, which will result in a greater force of impact. If we then compare, and I'll do it in different color to separate it, our rubber head or rubber hammerhead, we'll expect the collision to be more inelastic, and that means that the time of collision is higher or is increased. And that also means that the force of impact will be decreased. So what's the implications of that with construction? Let's go back and have a look. Okay, so constructional purposes. So with the steel hammerhead, the steel head, we use that for, paving nails. Okay, so the reason why we use this is because we need a much greater force to pressure the nail into whatever scaffold that we're using. So used because it applies a greater force and it's to push the nail into the scaffold. If we compare that with the rubber hammer, which is used for paving stone, because it applies a lower force due to long collision time, it can actually be used to create shapes or forms with more delicate material like stone, which is a lot more brittle and fragile. Okay, so how do we know that the time of collision will be increased and the force of impact will be decreased? The reason for this is because we know impulse of any collision is equal to 0 at the end. Okay, so we know that the change of momentum or impulse during a collision is equal to 0. So what that tells us is if this value is equal to 0, or it's a constant, so it's not 0, sorry, it should be is constant, a constant value. That means if this is a constant value, then force and time are inversely proportional to each other. So if we increase the time of collision, which is what the rubber head does, then we will decrease the force of impact, whereas if we decrease the time of collision, which is what the steel hammerhead does, that will increase the force of impact. And as such, we would want to use the rubber head for paving shapes and forms, whereas the steel rubber head, we want to use that for hard labor construction. Hopefully that was helpful to you. Give a like for support of more videos to come in the future. Have a nice day.